Hi folks, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, which means peace be upon you and the mercy of Allah and His blessings. Welcome to another episode of Let the Quran Speak. This program is brought to you by the Islamic Information and Dawa Center International located in Toronto. In today's program, we would like to reflect on the Quran, look at how the Quran has impacted humanity in general, but more so how the Quran impacts on individuals in particular. I have with me in the studio a guest visiting from Cape Town, South Africa, Dr.Abdullah Hakim Quick, who is well known to the communities in Canada and in fact around the world. He's known as a professor, or rather a PhD in Islamic and African history, and an Islamic scholar who has lectured in 35 different countries. Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick will share with us in this program some of his reflections on how the Quran has impacted his own particular life, how the Quran has made a difference in his person, in his academic and professional career. Dr. Quick, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. Assalamu
alaikum. Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dr. Quick, you came to Canada many decades ago. Can you tell us something about how you happened to be in Canada?
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. As a young man growing up in the 60s in the United States, my mind was open to the world. And so I saw Canada as a means of getting to the rest of the world. And so I migrated here in 1969. And I was fortunate enough to see this international community and also to meet Muslims here in Toronto.
You had migrated from the United States, is that right?
That's right.
And then soon after that, you embraced Islam. Well, how has the Quran impacted your life? First of all, what made you interested in Islam? Had it anything to do with the Quran itself?
Well, as a young man growing up in the United States, in this turbulent time they call the 60s, and this is the time of the generation of people who were questioning the war in Vietnam. They were questioning the world, the use of nuclear weapons and so forth and so on. And so I was looking within my own family and my own religion. I was born into a Christian family. And from there, I began to look at the world and try to put it all together. I wasn't satisfied with what I was seeing because I was seeing a very narrow approach to religion. And so therefore, I began to question Buddhism, Hinduism, different forms of life. And fortunately, studying history, which has always been my love, I found that Muslims were all over the world and they had a great impact. And then coming to Canada, I was able to come to Toronto, and I actually got a copy of the Quran itself. I began to read, and then pieces started to come together. So the questions that I had concerning the relationship between spiritual life and material life, the relationship between church and state, the relationship between political life, social life, and religious life, these were not being answered because within the secular, broad-based society, things tend to be put into compartments. And so if you are involved in politics, you're involved in politics. If you are involved in religion, then you're basically into religious affairs. If you focus on social life, you may not be so much involved in the economy. But the Quran began to open up the door as a revelation from God, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, in that light, I saw all of it coming together in a way of life. And so it was really that synthesis of the different aspects of existence that the Quran shed light on and then gave me this direction for the rest of my life.
And then I can see from your academic career that you have achieved a kind of integration of knowledge in the sense that you did not only become an Islamic scholar, but you also acquired a PhD from the University of Toronto in history. I'd like to talk a little bit about your academic career. You studied at the University of Medina. Was that soon after you embraced Islam?
Yes, actually about 3 years after the time I embraced Islam in 1970. I was awarded a scholarship. 2 Canadians were chosen by the Saudi government to travel to Medina and to study in the Islamic University. And fortunately, I was one of the 2. And so I spent 7 years in Saudi Arabia as a young North American, and it was a big switch in terms of language. I had to learn the Arabic language there in Arabia. And then with my wife Karima, who had embraced Islam also, we lived in the city of Medina, and we actually were able to take in that international flavor of that part of the world, because Medina and Mecca represent the heartland of Islam. It is a land of the pilgrimage. So it is really in that environment that I was able to grow, and that thirst that I had for looking at the world actually came into the city itself. Because one of the beautiful things about Medina is that every year over 2 million people are actually visiting the city.
Yes.
So you're able to take in from the cultures of all the different nations. And during the time of the pilgrimage season, I would actually travel in the crowds and see all the different African nations and their beautiful clothing and their cultures, and Southeast Asia, people from India, people from Bosnia, then people from South America, North America, from all over the world are coming. So I was able to drink, so to speak, in all these cultures and to see how it all comes together as one whole.
Do you get some sense of not only the universal nature of the Muslim community, but also the sense of brotherly and sisterly feeling among Muslims who come from different parts of the world? I mean, here you have people all flocking together into the single city, Medina, where you were. These are people who speak many different languages. They come from many different racial backgrounds. Do they relate to each other as a single community, or is there a kind of a racial divide that separates people?
Yeah, well, this is where the Quran stands out, and Islam as a way of life. Because being the revelation from the creator of the heavens and the earth, then it comes in a classical form of the Arabic language, which is above all of the local forms of Arabic, and which people from all parts of the world have been studying for the past 1,400 years. And so it is in the light of that divine form of Arabic that people make their prayers. They also communicate with each other. And so through that divine form of Arabic, I was able to communicate with Chinese Muslims, with African Muslims, with Russian Muslims, with Muslims from parts of the world that are so remote and their languages are so foreign. I would never have been able to relate to these people except through the light that comes from the Quran itself in this classical form of Arabic. And it sets up this community. And it's saying that there's no difference between white and black and white, Arab and non-Arab. It is the most pious. And so it is through that Quranic understanding that we were all able to come together as one big family, one big human family.
Now, after graduating from the Islamic University in Medina, you took up an interest in African history. Now, your grandmother, I believe, is from the Caribbean?
Yes, actually, my grandmother is from Barbados. And on my father's side, they were African Americans. And there's also some Mohawk, some Native American also. So my family is a blending of different nations. There's also British blood, because my great-grandfather, Mr. Bourne, came to the island of Barbados, and he married from the Bino family. Mr. Bino had 19 children.
Wow.
And so the Binos are famous cricket players, and they're also in government. There's probably some in the embassy here in Canada. In any event, the coming together of England and Africa, created my grandmother, and she came to North America.
What a wonderful blend. Now, you did an MA in African history, and then you went on with the University of Toronto to complete your PhD, and that was in African...
That was in West African Islamic history.
Okay. Now, what insights has that level of study given you on the development of Islam on the whole, and what Islam should mean for people in Canada, in the United States, and in fact all over the world?
Well, really what that did, it opened up my eyes from a number of points of view. First off, as an African American, there's always a natural yearning for roots, to try to find something about your heritage and background. So understanding the history of Islam on the African continent really opened up my eyes, because this is one of the early places where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, asked his followers to migrate when they're being persecuted in Mecca. Also, if you really look at the root definition of Islam, you find that it talks about the oneness of God. So the essence of Islam relates to all nations and all tribes, no matter what color you are. It really relates to Tawheed, to those people who believed in one God and tried to live a pious life. They tried to be positive in their relationship with each other and their relationship to creation. So therefore, when you look at African history, you find probably the oldest traces of human existence in Africa. And so from the early existence of men and women on earth, humanity, I began to explore this oneness of God and how it played itself out in ancient Egypt, how it played itself out in different parts of the African continent, and then with people migrating from the African continent to the rest of the world, you see how the oneness of God concept stays in all nations and all tribes. Then it also links itself with the Americas, because during the slavery period, about 30% of the slaves that were brought to Brazil and to the Caribbean and the United States and North America were Muslims. So within the history of the Caribbean and the United States and South America, you will find this history of Islam, this beautiful history of Islam, playing itself out again. And so, you know, that connection, I made that link and that connection, which led right up until now, where you see the United States, Canada, and the whole of North America being influenced by Islam before Columbus. And it leads up right into today, where Muslims are now probably the second largest religion in North America itself.
This is very interesting information. Very few people might have realized that Islam came to the United States, to the West Indies, to the Caribbean many centuries ago. And we'll have to come back and go through that information in some detail to find out how Islam actually spread to the West many centuries ago. But I'd like to reflect on a verse in the Quran and then ask you a question concerning this. Here's a verse that I've selected from Surah 4, the Surah of the Women. And it reads, "In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful," in the English translation. "O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord, who created you from a single person, created of like nature his mate, and from them twain scattered countless men and women. Reverence God, through whom you demand your mutual rights, and reverence the wombs that bore you, for God ever watches over you." That is from Surah Nisa, verse number 1. Now, how does this fit in with what you said about Tawheed? I mean, it's well and good for a religion to preach beautiful concepts like there is one God. How does that translate to humanity? Today, people are moving towards humanistic concepts. We recognize all human beings to be singly related. All our genes are somehow related, showing that humans have a single origin. And we're concerned for the benefit of humanity. If a religion is to speak to us in the modern age, a religion has to show concern for the welfare and benefits of humankind. Does the understanding of one God translate into a oneness of humanity as well?
Yes, I think it's important for us to understand that when the Quran is speaking about Tawheed, or unity, oneness, that it not only refers to the oneness in terms of the Creator, that we worship one God and not many gods, but it also refers to the oneness of humanity itself, and then the oneness within our existence. And so it is that type of unity that the world needs today. Within the 20th century that we have just completed, we have found many divisions, and we found that people have slaughtered each other, have hated each other, have set up societies based upon color, based upon nationality. And so there are many people within this 21st century who are now trying to come out of this, and they're looking for ways to unite themselves. Not only just as a human race to break down racial divisions, but also to unite science with religion, to unite politics with morality, so that we can be politicians and we can be good people. We can be involved in business and we can be honest. We can be living within the 20th century society, having the best technology, but we don't forget about God. How do you bring all these things together? People in the past 200 years have gone through such a change that things have gone to extremes. So you have some people who are highly religious and they have nothing to do with technology. You have other people who are involved in science and technology and they have nothing to do with God. But now there is a yearning from within. All of us have to die at one point in time. What lies beyond death? Where did we come from? The Big Bang Theory. If there was a Big Bang and this universe then came from one unit and it separated, who created the bang? Did the bang come by itself? What was in back of the bang? You see, all of these questions people are asking today, and this is where the Quran speaks, and it brings us the type of answers that we need to bring it all together in one whole.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about your professional career. You have had extensive experience in a number of various influential positions. When you completed your studies from the University of Medina, you served as imam and teacher in Los Angeles for a while. And then where did your career take you after that?
From Los Angeles in the United States, I moved to the Caribbean. And that was a time when many of the countries there were actually going through changes. And my wife, being originally from Jamaica, opened up the door to the Caribbean for us. And so we went to Kingston, Jamaica, and I was living there. And fortunately, because I had studied with many brothers and sisters from the region, we formed a type of union. And we traveled throughout Central America and the English-speaking islands in the Caribbean, and we're able to see what was the position of Muslims. And again, as a historian in my love and history, I was deeply researching the presence of Muslims, the presence of the belief in one God, and the early society before Columbus. What were the people like? And that type of living, that simple, natural type of living, how can it influence our society today?
Okay. Now, your experience with the Caribbean situation and your studies at the University of Toronto it seems to have culminated in your production, a book authored by yourself entitled, what is it called, Deeper Roots?
It's called Deeper Roots.
Okay. Yeah. And that, of course, is available so our viewers can have access to that. Now, you also served as the imam in the Jama Mosque, one of the largest Islamic institutions here in Toronto, for a number of years. In your experience here with the Toronto community, is there anything that stands out in particular that you feel that the Muslim community here needs to be quite aware of, that something either we're doing right and we need to continue doing it, or we're doing it not so well enough and we need to improve upon that?
Well, I would say that from my early time being here in Toronto, remember now in 1970, there were very few practicing Muslims here in Toronto, and there were only 2 places of worship that Muslims used to go to. And so from that time, the community expanded enormously until we find today so many places of worship. We find hundreds and thousands of Muslims from every part of the world. Now, being part of that growth helped me to see how the Muslims really have developed into this international community. And so on Friday, we would stand together shoulder to shoulder, white, black, yellow, brown, everybody together, rich and poor, right? Everybody standing in one line. We would worship one God. We would fast together. We would share in our food together. We would share in our sorrows and our joys, all as one group. Now, one of the dangers with ethnic presence is the fact that if people focus too much on their own ethnic group, then you can have an international community that is divided, where the houses of worship and the cultures focus on themselves, instead of all of the cultures contributing to one greater body. And that greater body is the ummah. And so the ummah, or the nation of Islam, the coming together of all the different tribes, different nationalities, that is one of the goals of Islam. And I believe that if Muslims can, keep this in their mind, that they're not here alone, that there are other people of other colors and races who believe who have the same God, and who are here in the GTA. And so we need to come together first, and to cooperate with each other, and to spend more time in bringing ourselves together instead of dividing ourselves up. But it doesn't stop there. It takes a step further, where that oneness, that unity, needs to be interpreted to the greater society itself. There are still thousands of people who need to have that integrated look on race, on society, and also that clear discussion of one God. So I believe that the community should spend more time in bringing the message out to the public, and programs such as this helps us to bring this message to those who might never hear it within a university or within a house of worship.
Now, this drive within you to share the Quran with the public led to your starting of the Dawa Night, which was something actually quite new and unique in Canada that you had begun. Tell us something about your experience with these Dawa Nights, what they are, how other Muslims can start such activity in their mosques, and what kinds of positive or negative responses can be expected from such an activity.
What we found back in the 80s, when Muslims were pouring into the country, is that there was a need not only for us to appreciate our own cultures, but also to help the public to appreciate the positive aspects that Islam had to offer. It was really during the 80s that there was a shift in the geopolitical relationship between the United States and the rest of the world. And so therefore, with the Cold War ending between Western powers and Eastern powers, somehow Muslims were designated as the enemies. And so you find in Hollywood, instead of attacking Germans, Russians, native people, or Japanese, the greatest enemy became the Arab terrorist, who would seize his hostages, and he wouldn't release them until his comrades were released from the prison. And so then you have all the folk heroes coming, attacking the Muslims as the new enemy. This was not what was happening on the ground. And so we had to show the people that Islam is based on peace, not on violence. And that when we say Assalamu alaikum, we are saying peace be upon you. Sometimes we will say the word of peace, sometimes 500 times during the day. It's a constant idea with us. So the idea of the Dawa Night was to open up to the public, what is Islam? To let them ask questions and to explain to them in a comfortable way, with no pressure applied to them, what is the message of Islam, and what beautiful contribution that we have to make to society. And that was very successful over the years, in that hundreds of people were able to come to the mosque without feeling the pressure of religion, so to speak, and sit down, even dressed in their own regular clothing, and they could ask this question in this relaxed type of atmosphere. They would ask their questions, and we would try to relate to where they were coming from, and also to show Islam's solutions to some of the present day problems. So on some of the Dawa Nights, we would talk about Islam and racism, Islam and abortion, Islam and homelessness, Islam and drugs, substance abuse, Islam and the family. So these issues that were so important to everybody, regardless of religion, we were showing an Islamic answer to it. And if somebody was interested in Islam during that discussion, then we would also make available to them information where they could also see how they could embrace Islam and they can become part of our community.
And two quick points. One is that we're mentioning the word Dawa, and it is an Arabic word. Some of our viewers are not Arabic speakers. Can you explain the etymology of this word?
Well, Dawa really is a call, and you could say it's outreach. So in a sense, it's Muslims reaching out to the world to give them the message, coming from the Creator, with no force, with no compulsion, but merely to deliver the message to the public. And this is really the essence of the message of the last Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him.
Yes. The other quick point I wanted to draw attention to is that a lot of people in the West think of religion as having to do with worship, with spirituality. Some people may even envision a sage sitting on a mountain just reciting the name of God or something like this, or reciting a mantra of some sort. Did you find in your experience that people sometimes become surprised if they find that Islam speaks to such a wide variety of social issues? You mentioned abortion and some other issues. What is your experience with that?
Yeah, this is an interesting point because the essence of Islam is not a religion in the Western sense of only being your dogma or who do you believe in, one God or three God or 20 gods. It is a way of life. And so as a way of life, it impacts everything on everything that you do, your economic life, your social life, your political life, you know, the spiritual, the material, all at once. It's like a circle. So it's not cut off at any point. All of it flows in together, you see? And so it is through that way of life that we are able to give, you know, answers to problems. And there are many people who are actually looking for some way to integrate the different facets of their life and then to connect themselves in this world to the hereafter. So this is what Islam does. It integrates your present world and it bridges the gap between this life and the hereafter.
Folks, we have a lot of information to share with you. I have with me as a guest in this episode, Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, visiting us from Cape Town, South Africa. He has his PhD in history from the University of Toronto. And in the next episode, we'll come back and try to pick his brains and find out how Islam spread to various parts of the world. Try to pick up on some of that historical information. In the meantime, past episodes of this program can be viewed by just clicking on our website. And I would like to ask you folks to support this program, to help us continue with airing this program. Our address will appear in a few moments. Your checks or money orders can be made out to the Islamic Information and Dawa Center International, or just simply the Islamic Information Center, and mark it off for the TV program.